My name is John Hinchey. I actually was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. Lived there until I was 6 years old. Moved to Nashville for 5 years and then came to Atlanta. I came from a long line of ministers, preachers. My father was a minister. His father was a minister. My uncle was a minister, and I think they wanted me to be a minister as well because I started out in Carson Newman College in Jefferson County, Tennessee. That was what we used to call preacher tech, and from there you were to go on to seminary and become a minister. I did start out at Carson Newman College, but later on I decided that I thought I could handle, in fact, I told my father, I think I can handle more than 10 laws, so I want to go to law school. And so he was very happy with that because, in fact, when he started his career, he actually wanted to be a lawyer. And so he started out at University of Tennessee Law School. But then he changed course and went into the ministry. So that was the kind of family that I grew up in. They were very academically oriented. They wanted their children to go to school and get into one of the three professions, to either be a doctor, to be a minister, or to be a lawyer. So that fell within their bracket, and they were happy, that I went to law school. I went to Emory Law School straight out of college, and from there, I decided that because I was sort of some people would say academic junkie, I wanted a little bit more. And so I applied for a scholarship to several law schools, one of which was Harvard. And I was very interested in international law. And I had just been hired out of Emory by E. Smythe Gambrell, who was one of the leading not construction lawyers, but leading lawyer in the U.S. I told him that, I would be more than happy to go to work for his law firm, which was one of the largest law firms in Atlanta at that time. But at the same time, I did want to broaden my education. In fact, I was very interested in international law. And he said, "Oh, well, I've got a scholarship up there. In fact, I'll be happy to let you have it." And so I was able to get a full scholarship to go to Harvard. I studied international law. But then the wander bug hit me again, and I applied for a Ford Foundation grant because I had never been out of the Southeast, and so I wanted to see the world. And I decided that I would apply for this Ford Foundation grant. I did, and I was accepted, and I was assigned to the Supreme Court of Pakistan. And so I was actually assigned to the Chief Justice there, and I went through this training program shortly after I graduated from Harvard and went to Pakistan and worked there for a year and a half, essentially as a law clerk. And what my job, I was given a special job by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and that was to help put together a law review for Pakistan. At that time, Pakistan did not have a law review. By the way, the court system in Pakistan and India at that time, Pakistan being a separate country, was English. So there was no problem at all in me working with the court and the lawyers and the judges. And so my job for a year and a half while living in Pakistan was to contact the judges, the lawyers, and ask them to write law review articles. Then I would edit them, and they would be published and put into the law review. So I think we were able to get out 2 full issues while I was actually there. But then I decided that, after that assignment was finished, by the way, they paid me in rupees, and so I was able to take that money and buy essentially a round-the-world ticket. And I wanted to take the long way home, which I did. So I traveled another 6 months just trying to visit as many different countries as I could possibly go to until I ran out of money. So I was able to go around Africa. I was able to go through Eastern Europe, go through Russia, come down around the Malaysian countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, spent about a month or two in Japan, finally landed in Hawaii, and had just enough money to buy a plane ticket to San Francisco to get home and find a job. So I did. I went to San Francisco, and then I looked at my wallet, and I had just enough money to get a Greyhound bus ticket to come from San Francisco back to Atlanta. And so that's exactly what I did. I spent 2.5 days on the big dog, as they usually came home, borrowed enough money from my sister to buy a suit, went to the Attorney General of Georgia and said, I need a job. Fortunately, I had some friends who worked there, so they were able to vouch for me, even though I'd had this checkered history of, going to graduate school and spending a year and a half in Pakistan and so forth. But they hired me, and so I was able to work for 4.5 years with the Attorney General of Georgia, Arthur Bolton. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience because I was able to represent a lot of different state agencies. I was able to take a couple of cases up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so it was really a great opportunity to see what government law was like. But then you were expected, after 4 or 5 years with the Attorney General, to move on because they could not continue to pay salaries that would be comparable to those being paid by law firms in Atlanta. At that point, went to work for a small law firm. I went back to Mr. Gambrell and I said, look, I just don't want to be in a large law firm. I want to practice law. I think I even want to be a judge. So I moved to Decatur, Georgia, and basically opened up a solo practice. I shared space with a lawyer by the name of Dan McConaughey, and we handled just about everything that walked in the door. I mean, from divorce cases to criminal cases to adoptions to wills and estates, whatever it was, we did. And he would send cases to me, and that's how I practiced law and made my living. The problem with that was that I could never feel that I was adequately prepared for anything. I mean, I think I had the honor of losing the first uncontested name change in the state of Georgia, because every case I felt like I had to put so much work into that I couldn't bill the client for. And so it was really frustrating for me. And I said, this is just not my cup of tea. What do I want to do? And at that time, I was about 32 years old, and I was getting well on into my career. Other of my friends were doing extremely well in their firms, and so I felt like I was getting a little bit behind. But I really was not fulfilling my dreams, and so I took my small family. Well, first, let me back up. I applied for a fellowship at Oxford and Cambridge, thinking that I wanted to go into the teaching of law. And so my wife is very long-suffering, fortunately, and we had 2 small kids, and we were able to rent our house out to 4 Emory Law students. And I took us over to Oxford, England, where I worked essentially for a year and a half, working on a degree. A Master of Letters in Comparative Law, which was very much fun. I really enjoyed doing that. While I was over there, I decided that we obviously needed some money. And the American Bar Association each year has what they call their Ross Essay Competition. And they offered a huge prize for winning that competition. It was $5,000, which was a lot of money, and for us anyway. And so while I was over there, fortunately, when I was in high school, I learned how to type, which is probably the most valuable thing I learned in high school. And so I typed my own essay on the First Amendment theory of advertising. And so sent it back in, and believe it or not, I won the Ross essay competition. And that paid for our entire year in Oxford. So came back, and by that time I needed a real job. So a friend of mine who was actually lived next door to us in Atlanta said, I'm putting together a new law firm. And we're leaving our firms. We're going to start a new practice, and we will guarantee you a salary, which turned out to be considerably more than I was going to make as an incoming law professor. And so recognizing that it's more important to pay the mortgage and take care of my family than go down this track of becoming a law professor, I went with them. It was a small boutique law firm that focused on insurance defense and representing surety companies. Now, the relationship between surety companies and the construction law, most people know, but surety bonds are issued to construction contractors to guarantee that they will complete a project and pay off their vendors and subcontractors. So that was my entry into construction law. I knew nothing about it when I started, but I stayed with that firm for almost 15 years. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating law because we dealt with just about every type of project that you could imagine. There is a downside, though, to representing insurance companies and surety companies, and that is that they paid on the lower end of the hourly rate scale. And so in our firm, we decided, this was about, I'd say about 5 or 6 years into practice. We could see where that was going. And so we decided that we needed to broaden our practice and look for other more productive lines of work. So we did a systematic study of the construction industry and the construction bar. And we could see that contractors were well represented by specialists. They were represented by firms like Smith, Curry, and Hancock here in Atlanta, and many, many other boutique law firms. Architects were similarly situated, where they were represented by specialty counsel. But owners generally were not, particularly public owners. So we decided that we would reorient our focus from representing surety companies to representing public owners. And so the way we developed that practice was to develop a seminar. This was about the time, late 70s, early 80s, when seminars were just coming into vogue. And so we spent about a year and a half developing a manual, practice manual, and a lecture and a 2-day presentation, 2-day seminar for public owners, private owners too, but mostly public owners. That is, states, counties, municipalities, public authorities that were involved in construction projects. And so colleges and universities at that time were very interested in putting on educational programs, seminars. And I mean, every college around the country. So we hired a person to help us contact those colleges and universities and ask them, would you like for us to come and put on a 2-day seminar? Obviously, we weren't paid, but they would pay our expenses to go out, and we put on the seminar. And as a result of that, we were able to develop a very strong practice in representing public owners and on construction projects that were faced with construction disputes. We were actually able to help them in 2 regards. We would help them draft their contracts and then handle any disputes. And that was our way of developing that entire area of practice. It proved to be very productive. In fact, I think, at least at one time, we were probably the largest practice in the country that I was aware of that focused on that specialty of representing public owners in construction projects. 1991, I received a telephone call from a friend of mine who worked at King & Spalding. And we all recall that in 1990, Atlanta won the bid to put on the 1996 Olympic Games, which was huge. And there was only one problem from King and Spalding's viewpoint. Naturally, they were going to represent the Atlanta Committee on the Olympic Games because for years prior to 1990, several of their partners had basically taken off from their law practice, and they traveled all over the world, meeting every member of the International Olympic Committee, convincing them that Atlanta was the place to hold the 1996 Olympics. And so they were successful in doing that, to everyone's surprise. So when Atlanta was announced as the winner, King and Spalding was going to be the lawyer that basically handled everything for the Atlanta Olympic Games Committee. But they had no one who handled construction in the firm at that time. And so they were interested in having someone come over to the firm and help them put together a group to handle all of the Olympic venues. The Olympic Committee had about a budget of a little over $1 billion for all the construction. There were about 30 different venues that were going to have to be built, from the Olympic Stadium to the kayaking center up in North Georgia. So I thought about that, and I thought, okay, it's going to be great fun to represent the Atlanta Olympic Committee, and the largest at that time, the largest construction project going on in the world. But what about after that? What happens then? The Atlanta Olympic Games is going to come to an end in 1996. Then what? So I thought, okay, King and Spalding has a lot of corporate clients who are not continually involved in construction like contractors would be, but they're the ones who start these major construction projects. And so why not? And what is my specialty? Representing owners in construction. Most of the corporate clients at King and Spalding and other large law firms were owners or potential owners. So I thought, okay, that's a great area for me to try to develop. It looks like it's going to be promising. So I decided to go to King and Spalding, which I did in the fall of 1992. And so when I went over there, I was basically the only lawyer who knew anything about construction law. So immediately I hired 3 or 4 young lawyers to come and work with me. And so we were able to put together a construction group, primarily from 1992 to 1996, working almost strictly on the 1996 Olympic Games. It was our job to develop all the contracts, and it was our job to handle any and all issues that came up regarding the 1996 Olympic construction program. One of the most interesting and valuable things that I learned, and really it was a unique construction education experience, was meeting the director of construction for the Atlanta Olympic Games. He was a man by the name of Bill Moss. He was hired by Billy Payne, who was, the director and CEO of the Atlanta Olympic Games, to come up from Disney World. Bill Moss was the guy that basically directed the construction program for Epcot Center, for the MCA Universal Studios, and for many of the projects at Disney World. And so he was the guy that was hired to come up and manage the Olympic Games. And so worked very closely with Bill for about 4.5 years. And every Thursday, I'll never forget this, every Thursday, this was an all-day meeting, he would invite in his construction managers for all of the venues. There were about 30 of them going on at the same time. And how you manage 30 different projects, from the Olympic Stadium to the smaller ones, was it was an undertaking that was just inconceivable. How do you do that? But he was able to do that. He would go around the room and ask each construction director to report on issues. It was so basically that day was just an issue discussion. And every construction director would come in, they always came in with an issue and a proposal to resolve the issue, because he insisted on that. If you got an issue, what's your proposal to fix it or deal with it? And then, for the most part, if he couldn't do it off the cuff, he would turn to me. Okay, John, how do we handle this? Or go handle it. So in that way, I was able to see all aspects of a construction project, learn what goes wrong and why and how to fix it. And so it was just invaluable to me to go through that process. So fortunately, the Atlanta Games were a complete success. I think Atlanta was the first Olympic committee to actually earn a small profit. Everything else had been a big bust because they built these wonderful monuments that had no afterlife. They couldn't be used afterwards. And one of the critical criteria for the Atlanta Games was that every venue has to have an afterlife. It has to be used for something useful after the Games. Just a couple of interesting things about my experience with the Olympic Games. We had what we called a command center it was at the Merchandise Mart. It was an amazing place. It looked like Houston Central. It was a amphitheater on the inside, and they had banks of monitors on the wall. And every aspect of the Olympic Games, this is while the Games were actually going on, every aspect of the Olympic Games was being brought in by closed circuit television. And 24 hours every day, 7 days a week while the Games were going on, they had representatives of each one of the divisions of the Olympic Games going on, from security to emergency response, to press, the press releases, and construction. So several times during the Olympic Games, I had to be there and sit in a desk and handle any issues that might come up during that shift, that day. And the one event that I remember is that while I was sitting at my desk, at the construction desk, had my computer and my microphone and headphones on and all that, it turned out that one of the Russian representatives had actually died of a heart attack. And I don't know why they came to me, but it was a legal matter. I guess I was the only lawyer in the room, and they said, "What do we do? We've had a Russian citizen in the country who's died. So what do we do? What legal issues are going to be involved?" So, unbelievably, I had worked for a funeral home when I was in law school, because law students at that time, college students, some Georgia Tech students, were hired to drive ambulances and to go around with ambulances at the funeral, because the funeral homes were the ones who operated ambulances. So fortunately, I called the funeral home where I had worked before as a law student. I said, what do you do when you have a foreign national who dies in your country? What do you do? And they said, well, we deal with that from time to time, and here's what you do. And they gave me a list of things to do, places to call. And so I was able to handle that little issue. So it was a kind of a crisis command center. It was just really interesting and a lot of fun. But moving on from there, while I was at King & Spalding, I was able to get involved in some of the really interesting international projects. I remember in 2004, we had the Global 8 conference come to Sea Island. Well, in Atlanta, while I was there and even before, I was able to be involved in some respect or another with just about every major Atlanta facility. Not just the Olympic Games, but also the Atlanta airport. The Atlanta airport was almost continually under construction. And so I was able to get involved in the construction and disputes involving Concourse E, MARTA, again, was in almost continual construction for a long time, since the beginning, so I was able to work on several projects involving MARTA. I was able to work with the Turner Broadcasting Company in most of their projects in and around Georgia and around the world. Also the Coca-Cola Company. That's another unique thing about practicing construction law in Atlanta. There's so many international companies that have located their headquarters here. And so it's only natural that they would turn to their local law firm and ask them to get involved in these projects. And at this time, the larger law firms like King & Spalding were beginning to see potential with construction law practices. Before that, construction law was practiced by the boutique firms like Smith, Curry & Hancock and many others. So now the big law firms were beginning to see the value of construction projects, particularly getting in on the front end of a project by doing the contracts. And so that's the unique way of marketing that is really attractive to large law firms, because they do the contracts. And if they do the contracts for a construction project, then who is it likely that the client is going to call when there's a big dispute? It's going to be the law firm that did their construction contracts. And if they've got someone there to handle that, then that's great, because they can handle the project from the beginning through the end, both the front end and the back end. So that was another. About that time, other large law firms were beginning to pick up construction practice, like Smith, Gambrell, and many others that came along. Troutman Sanders. Every large law firm now has a really strong construction practice. So that has evolved from when I started in 1977 until now. Most of the larger law firms are very active in construction law. I think there's a tremendous potential for construction lawyers, and I think it's a very exciting potential. I mentioned some things in our earlier group discussion, but the industry is evolving into new and very exciting areas. We mentioned some of them. BIM, building information modeling, where they can build a building literally virtually on a computer before they put the first shovel in the ground. And that way they can anticipate problems in the beginning and avoid a lot of the issues that we see now. Integrated project delivery, which is, instead of having the classic owner contracting with an architect and a contractor, now you have the owner, the design professional, the contractor, and many of the key vendors coming together in a single-purpose entity for the purpose of delivering the project. And in that way, they all have a stake in it, and everybody's success redounds to the success of everybody involved, and everybody's failure hurts everyone involved. So therefore, their strong motivation is to have success. And instead of asserting claims against one another, they're all trying to come up with creative ways to solve the problem. So that is a very unique aspect of construction delivery that we're seeing now used in more and more projects. 3D printing is going to be another wholly new technology for building projects. Modular construction. Sustainability, environmental concerns now are leading to whole new areas of practice being developed for construction lawyers. So on and on and on. It's just an exciting new development which offers so many opportunities for young lawyers who want to become involved in construction law. And fortunately now there are many sources. There are many textbooks that are written. There are many how to do it handbooks. So it's not like you have to go and scrounge around for materials. It's all there at your fingertips, not to mention literally at your fingertips by being there on a computer and being able to access just about every source of construction and information that a person could possibly want. All in all, I would do it again. It's been a wonderful run, and I would recommend it to any young construction lawyer to to give it a try.